We need hungrier talent who can meet higher targets, Brian explained while sliding the termination papers across the polished conference table. The company is moving in a new direction. My name's Darren McCabe, 46 years old, 9 years as senior account executive at Trivana Corp in Kansas City, Missouri. I'd spent nearly a decade building a client portfolio that accounted for almost 40% of the company's revenue. No shortcuts, just long days, constant travel, and relationships built on trust. I smiled, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out without argument. Brian Ellsworth had arrived 6 months ago as our new vice president of sales, brought in by the CEO to reinvigorate the team. He wore custom suits, spoke in tired motivational phrases, and had never once joined me on a client call. 3 weeks after starting, he'd implemented a new commission structure that slashed my earnings by 20%, despite my numbers being consistently strong. The signs were there. My desk had been moved to a corner during office renovations. My name disappeared from meeting invites. Yesterday I'd noticed IT servicing my computer while I was at lunch. Small things, not worth mentioning, but enough to know something was coming. I packed 9 years into a single cardboard box, family photos, a coffee mug my daughter had painted, and a folder of client contact information I'd kept separate from the company database. Just habit, really. Need help with that? Asked Valerie from accounting. She looked genuinely confused. Are you changing offices? Something like that, I replied, not wanting to make a scene. On the elevator ride down, I stood next to Everett Stanton, our CEO. He nodded without really seeing me, too focused on his phone. He had no idea what Brian had just done or what it would mean for quarterly projections. But he would, soon enough. Walking to my car, I didn't feel anger, just a strange sense of clarity, like waking up from a long, comfortable dream to find the house was never really yours to begin with. I drove home in silence, no calls, no radio, just thinking about tomorrow. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my driveway. Travis Hendricks, my biggest client. The annual contract renewal was next week. He'd texted me about dinner reservations for when he'd be in town. He didn't know yet. Nobody did. I set the phone on the kitchen counter without answering and looked out the window. 9 years of client relationships all built on my word and my reliability. Brian didn't just fire an employee today. He'd cut the only line connecting Trivanta to millions in revenue, and he had no idea. I joined Trivanta back when it was still called Midwestern Financial Services, before the rebranding and the fancy downtown office. Everett hired me himself, straight from a competitor where I'd been hitting targets but getting passed over for promotion. I want someone who knows this market, he'd said, someone clients trust. For 7 years, he was right to trust me. I built our client base from regional businesses to national accounts, extended our contracts from 1-year terms to 3 and 5, brought in Lockhart Manufacturing when they left our biggest competitor, added the Henderson Group when nobody thought we had a chance. My wife Rebecca used to joke that I was married to my clients. Thursday night dinner with the Johnsons again? She'd ask, already knowing the answer. The kids grew used to me missing ball games and recitals. Dad's working became their normal. I promised it would be worth it someday. 3 promotions, 2 office expansions, and 1 recession later, Trivanta had grown from a $4 million operation to a $30 million enterprise, with my accounts responsible for about $12 million of that. Not that anyone had calculated the exact percentage until Brian arrived. The first red flag appeared during a quarterly review meeting, 3 months after Brian took over sales. Your client acquisition rate has flatlined, he said, pointing to a chart that showed I'd only added 2 new accounts that quarter. Because I'm focused on expanding existing relationships, I explained. The Lockhart contract just doubled. The future is in new business, Brian insisted. We need hunters, not farmers. A week later, my executive assistant, Julia, was reassigned. The following month, my travel requests required additional approval. My expense reports came back with questions. Small things. Death by 1,000 cuts. I started hearing whispers about fresh talent being interviewed. Young MBAs with aggressive pitches and no industry experience. Brian called them disruptors. Last month, he hired Alicia Winters, 29, from a tech startup. During her first week, she was assigned to join me on a call with Travis Hendricks. No explanation, no proper introduction, just showing her the ropes. Travis noticed. After the call, he texted me, "Who's the new girl? Are you training your replacement?" I laughed it off, just expanding the team. But driving home that night, I felt something shift in my gut, the kind of certainty that comes from years of reading boardrooms and client faces. Something wasn't right. I should have trusted that feeling sooner. I placed my cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. The house was empty. Rebecca was at her sister's place in Denver for the week, helping with a new baby. Probably for the best. I needed the quiet. I pulled out my personal phone and scrolled through my contacts. 9 years of relationships. Over 200 clients, vendors, and industry connections. People who trusted me to handle their business. People who'd signed with Trivanta because of me, not our corporate marketing or flashy downtown office. My work phone, now sitting disabled in the box, contained only the official correspondence. The dinner invitations, the golf outings, the personal cell numbers of CEOs and decision-makers, those were all here on my personal device. Information I'd accumulated by being someone people wanted to work with. I sipped my drink and felt a strange calm settle over me. No panic. No desperation about mortgage payments or health insurance. Just a clear understanding of what had happened and what would happen next. The bourbon burned going down. 9 years of 60-hour weeks, of missed family dinners and little league games. 9 years of building something I thought was mine, only to discover it wasn't. I opened my laptop and pulled up my employment contract. The non-compete clause was there, but limited in scope. 1 year, and only applicable if I left voluntarily. Being terminated changed things. There was no legal barrier to taking my clients elsewhere. My phone buzzed. Travis again. Dinner reservation confirmed for Thursday. Looking forward to discussing the renewal. I stared at the message for a long time. Travis Hendricks represented $1.7 million in annual business for Trivanta. His company, Lockhart Manufacturing, had been with me for 6 years. Before that, 3 years at my previous firm. Almost a decade of trust. And he wasn't alone. The Henderson Group, Westfield Properties, Carlton Industries, together they accounted for another $1.5 million. All of them had contract renewals coming up in the next 30 days. All of them dealt exclusively through me. I set my glass down and made a decision. I wouldn't call anyone tonight, wouldn't send angry emails or make threats. I'd sleep on it, wake up clear-headed, and then make exactly 3 phone calls. Not to vent or complain. Just to inform my closest clients that I was no longer with Trivanta, effective immediately. The rest would happen on its own. I took out the family photos from my box. My daughter's graduation, my son's wedding, the trip to Yellowstone we almost canceled because of a client emergency. I'd missed too much already. Tomorrow I'd start making different choices. I finished my bourbon and went upstairs to sleep in an empty house. For the first time in years, I didn't set an alarm. No early flights. No quarterly projections to review before dawn. Just the calm certainty that Brian Ellsworth had made a catastrophic mistake, and I didn't need to do anything but step aside and let it unfold. I made my 3 calls the next morning. No dramatics, just facts. Travis, I'm no longer with Trivanta as of yesterday. Wanted you to hear it from me directly. His response was immediate. What happened? Who's handling our account now? Brian Ellsworth will probably reach out, or maybe Alicia Winters. A long pause. The girl from the meeting, she doesn't know our business. That's all I can tell you, the rest is your decision. Similar conversations with James Henderson and Peter Carlton. No suggestions, no recruitment pitch, just information, delivered with the same reliability they'd come to expect from me. By noon, my personal phone was buzzing constantly. Other clients had heard. The industry was small that way. At 2 p.m., Everett Stanton called. I let it go to voicemail. Darren, this is Everett. We need to talk about your transition. Several clients are expressing concerns. Please call me back immediately. I didn't. Instead, I drove downtown to meet with Lawrence Finch, an attorney who specialized in employment law. I'd helped his son-in-law secure financing for a restaurant 3 years ago. He owed me a favor. They can't stop you from working, Lawrence confirmed after reviewing my termination papers, but they'll try to scare your clients from following you. Prepare for that. By 4 p.m., Trevanta's legal department had emailed a reminder about confidentiality obligations. By 5 p.m., Brian had texted, "Let's discuss your exit package. There might be room for consulting work." Too late. My phone buzzed again at 5:30 p.m. "Travis. Just got off a call with your CEO and that VP who fired you. They promised continuity, said Alicia would handle everything personally. Then they offered a 10% discount on renewal." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "That I'd think about it." I said nothing. Travis continued, "I've sent notice terminating our contract, citing change in relationship management. Henderson and Carlton did the same." Still, I said nothing. "Darren, where are you landing? Because wherever it is, that's where our business is going." That night, 3 more companies from my portfolio sent termination notices to Trevanta. By morning, the total was 8, representing over $3.2 million in contracts. Everett called an emergency board meeting. I know because Julia, my former assistant, texted me. "Complete chaos here. Brian trying to blame you for client tampering. CEO asking why nobody saw this coming." My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. "Darren McCabe," I answered. "Michael Grantley here, Grantley and Company. A competitor, smaller firm, better reputation. I hear you're available and several of our mutual friends speak highly of you." "I'm listening." "Senior vice president position, 6-figure signing bonus, full autonomy to manage your own accounts, and a seat on our executive committee. When would you want me to start?" "How's tomorrow sound?" I accepted on the spot, not out of urgency or desperation, but because it was exactly what I wanted: respect, autonomy, and recognition of the value I brought. That afternoon, Brian texted again. "Board approved a retention package, full salary for 6 months plus stock options. Just help us transition your accounts." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. They'd had 9 years to value what I built. Now they were scrambling to put a price on it after the fact. Too little. Far too late. 1 week into my new role at Grantley and Company, Julia called me from a personal number. "You need to know what happened," she said. It wasn't just Brian wanting his own people. I sat in my new corner office, larger than the one at Trevanta, and listened as 9 years of history reshuffled into a clearer picture. "They were planning to sell the firm," Julia explained. "Veritas Capital made an offer 2 months ago, but with conditions. They wanted to bring in their own account managers for the major clients, integrate them with their existing portfolio companies." The pieces clicked into place. Brian hadn't been hired to grow sales. He'd been brought in to transition accounts away from me, making them company assets rather than relationships tied to a single executive. My termination wasn't about performance. It was preparation for acquisition. "How do you know this?" I asked. "I'm still assigned to the executive suite. I see the documents, hear the conversations. Yesterday they pulled the offer. Veritas won't buy without the client base you built." After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. 9 years of loyalty, and they'd been willing to detach me from my clients like removing a middleman. Not because I failed. Because I succeeded too well. The relationships were too strong, too personal. They needed me gone before clients could be repackaged as corporate assets. I opened my laptop and checked my email. More former clients had reached out. The industry was humming with the news. Darren McCabe had moved to Grantley and clients were following. Trevanta's stock had dropped 12% in 5 days. My phone buzzed with a text from Everett. "Can we meet? Just you and me, no lawyers." I didn't respond immediately. The deeper betrayal settled in my stomach like cold lead. Not just fired, deliberately sacrificed as part of a corporate chess game. I picked up the phone and called Travis Hendricks. "I need to ask you something," I said. Did Trevanta try to introduce you to anyone from Veritas Capital in the last few months? A pause. How did you know? They brought in some guy Thomas during our quarterly review. Said he was a strategic advisor looking at our industry. Asked a lot of questions about our future needs. Confirmation. They'd been parading Veritas representatives in front of my clients, laying groundwork for transition, all while I was still employed, still trusting I was building something that mattered. More calls revealed the same pattern. Behind my back, meetings scheduled, information gathered, relationships probed for weaknesses or areas where I might be expendable. By the end of the day, I'd confirmed that at least 6 of my major accounts had been covertly introduced to Veritas representatives, all under the guise of strategic advisors or industry consultants. I finally texted Everett back, "No meeting necessary. I understand the Veritas situation completely." His response came quickly. "It was a business decision, Darren, nothing personal." But it was personal. 9 years of building relationships, of knowing clients' kids' names and their vacation spots, of answering calls on weekends and holidays, all reduced to an impediment for corporate transaction. I closed my laptop and looked out at the Kansas City skyline from my new office. The view was different here, clearer somehow. Grantley had already signed contracts with 11 of my former clients, representing nearly $5 million in annual revenue, and more were coming. Not because I was recruiting them, but because in this business, trust followed people, not logos or corporate strategies. Trevanta hadn't just lost a salesman, they'd lost the foundation their growth was built upon, and they still didn't fully understand why. 3 weeks after joining Grantley, I received an invitation to speak at the Midwest Financial Services Conference. The panel topic, Building Client Loyalty in a Transactional Market. The irony wasn't lost on me. I accepted, not for ego or exposure, but because I knew who would be in that audience. Industry peers, potential clients, and, most importantly, Trevanta's remaining leadership team. Everett never missed this conference. Neither did the board members. Meanwhile, Grantley had given me resources Trevanta never offered: 2 dedicated analysts, marketing support, and most crucially, equity partnership. Every client I brought in wasn't just commission, it was building something I partially owned. I spent a month preparing for the conference, not with flashy slides or rehearsed anecdotes, but with data. Working nights with my analysts, I compiled performance metrics for every client who had followed me from Trevanta to Grantley. The results were undeniable. Average service response time reduced by 53%. Implementation costs down 30%. Client satisfaction scores up by 22 points. It wasn't just about me. It was about proving what happened when companies valued relationships over transactions. The morning of the conference, I reviewed my notes one last time. No dramatic reveals, no naming names, just facts and outcomes. Professional, measured, devastating. As I walked into the hotel ballroom, I spotted Everett immediately, huddled with 2 board members near the coffee station. His face tightened when he saw me. I nodded politely and moved on. The panel discussion began with standard questions about market trends and technological disruption. When my turn came, I spoke plainly about what clients truly valued. In an age where everything is automated and digitized, personal accountability has become the rarest commodity, I said. Companies often mistake client relationships for company assets. They aren't. They're trust agreements between individuals that need constant reinforcement. I presented my data without mentioning Trevanta by name, just case studies of clients who had switched firms and seen immediate improvements. The lesson isn't about retention packages or contractual obligations, I concluded. It's about understanding that when you treat relationship managers as interchangeable parts, clients will show you exactly how wrong that assumption is. During the Q&A, an audience member, a young analyst I didn't recognize, asked the question everyone was thinking. Isn't your recent move from Trevanta to Grantley, along with several major clients, exactly the scenario companies fear when they consider how much autonomy to give relationship managers? The room went silent. I could feel Everett's eyes boring into me from across the room. That's a fair question, I replied. But consider the alternative. Trivanta lost those clients not because I took them, but because they failed to understand what those clients actually valued. No one followed me out of personal loyalty alone. They followed because their needs were consistently better met through my approach to service, an approach my former employer decided was no longer aligned with their direction. I paused, making brief eye contact with Everett. Every company has the right to change direction, and every client has the right to decide if that new direction serves their interests. The market is brutally efficient that way. After the panel, 3 more former Trivanta clients approached me. By the end of the conference, Grantley had signed letters of intent with 5 new accounts, representing another $2.7 million in annual revenue. That evening, I checked the financial news. Trivanta had announced a restructuring. Brian Ellsworth was pursuing other opportunities. The Veritas acquisition was officially dead. Their stock had fallen another 8%. I closed my laptop without a trace of satisfaction or triumph, just the quiet certainty that comes from being proven right in the most definitive way possible, by the market itself. The lesson had been delivered. Whether they would learn from it was no longer my concern. 6 months after my termination, I stood in Grantley's largest conference room, surrounded by my team and the company's leadership. On the screen behind me, a single slide displayed our quarterly results. $8.4 million in new business, 70% from former Trivanta clients. Michael Grantley himself raised a glass. To the best acquisition we've ever made, and we didn't even have to buy a company to get it. Polite laughter rippled through the room. I smiled but didn't join in. This wasn't about celebration for me. It was about validation. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Trivanta Corp announces CEO transition. Everett Stanton steps down amid continued revenue challenges. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without showing anyone. Some victories don't need an audience. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Alicia Winters, the young woman Brian had tried to position as my replacement. I've been let go along with most of the sales team. Any chance Grantley is hiring? I forwarded it to HR with a note. Worth interviewing, not her fault what happened. As I was leaving the office, my assistant handed me an envelope that had been couriered over. Inside was a handwritten note from Everett Stanton. You were right. I put transaction above relationship. Cost the company everything. If you're ever willing to have coffee, I'd appreciate the chance to apologize in person. I folded the note and placed it in my jacket pocket. Maybe someday. Not yet. That evening, driving home, I passed Trivanta's building. The sign was being removed from the facade. The local business journal had reported they were downsizing to a smaller office in the suburbs. I didn't slow down, didn't take a photo, just drove on, eyes forward toward the life I was building on my own terms. 1 year to the day after Brian had slid those termination papers across the conference table, I signed the final documents making me a full partner at Grantley & Company. The firm had grown 34% since my arrival. My client portfolio now represented nearly $20 million in annual revenue. I closed the manila folder containing the partnership agreement and looked out my office window at the Kansas City skyline. The same buildings, the same city, but everything else had changed. Rebecca entered with 2 cups of coffee. Signed an official? I nodded. Signed an official. She sat across from me, studying my face. You don't look as happy as I expected. Just thinking. About Trivanta? I shook my head. About what I'm building here, about doing it right this time. That morning, I'd approved hiring 3 new account managers, all with the same profit-sharing structure I'd negotiated for myself. No one would build something here only to have it taken away. That was my first act as partner. My phone buzzed. Travis Hendricks. Heard about the partnership. Congratulations. Knew you'd land on your feet. Thanks to clients like you. No, he corrected. Thanks to you being who you are. We just followed the value. After we hung up, I picked up the frame Rebecca had given me last Christmas, a simple quote on parchment paper. The best revenge is massive success. I placed it back on the credenza, face down. That chapter was closed. I took out my calendar and booked lunch with Everett Stanton. Not to gloat, not to rehash the past, but because sometimes the final step in moving forward is releasing the weight of what happened before. I shut down my computer, picked up my keys, and walked out to meet Rebecca. We had tickets to our son's band performance, something I wouldn't have made time for in my previous life. Some losses clear the way for better victories. Some fires burn away what needs to go. I'd never been more certain of that than I was today.